want to emphasize to the committee that when I reported my concerns on July 10th relating to Ambassador Sondland and then July 25th relating to the President, I did so out of a sense of duty. I privately reported my concerns in official channels to the proper authority in the chain of command. My intent was to raise these concerns because they had significant national security implications for our country. I never thought that I'd be sitting here testifying in front of this committee and the American public about my actions.
At no time was I aware of or knowingly took part in an effort to urge Ukraine to investigate former Vice President Biden.
A few moments there from the testimonies of Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman and the former special envoy to Ukraine, Kurt Volker, former top National Security Council official Timothy Morrison, and Vice President Mike Pence's aide Jennifer Williams also addressed the House Intelligence Committee yesterday. And today, United States Ambassador to the EU, Gordon Sondland, Secretary of Defense, Deputy Assistant Laura Cooper, and Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs David Hale will all take their turns in front of congressional leaders.
Despite the media circus surrounding the inquiry, it doesn't seem to be resonating significantly outside of Washington. So here to help us get a better handle of what's happened so far with the impeachment inquiry is Intercept journalist Glenn Greenwald. He joins us now via Skype. Thank you so much for joining us, Jen. We really appreciate it.
Great to see you, Glenn.
Thank you for having me. Good to be with you guys.
So, Glenn, one of the things that really struck me yesterday, there was actually a particular question from the Democratic Council in which they asked Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, they said, were you aware that the president was departing, quote, from official United States policy? And it struck me very much that, that the national security state was the one that was setting official U.S. policy and that the duly elected president was departing from that. That was one of the major takeaways that I had from that testimony.
Yeah, I think that's been one of the primary themes of the Trump presidency, this idea that what's most dangerous about Trump is that he believes in a whole set of foreign policy beliefs that he actually campaigned on and that therefore were ratified by the American people that are dangerous because the CIA and the Pentagon and the bipartisan military and think tank class in Washington doesn't accept. And what I find actually dangerous, independent of those debates, is the idea that it's not the elected president, but the, whatever you want to call them, Dwight Eisenhower called them the military-industrial complex, people have called them the national security blob, the permanent power faction in Washington, the idea that they, and not our elected officials, determine foreign policy. Obviously, there's this narrow question in impeachment about whether Trump did typical Trumpian things in kind of linking the investigation of the Bidens to military aid. But the much broader and more important theme is anger over Trump for his foreign policy views about Russia and Ukraine, which is that it's not worth provoking Russia by siding with Ukraine, providing military assistance to Ukraine, by involving the United States in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, a position that was shared, ironically, by Barack Obama. That's the real issue driving the impeachment hearings, and this much narrower issue is just the pretext.
Right. I think that's really well said, and you articulated so well something that I've struggled to say, which is, look, you can think it's not okay for a president to tie aid to investigation of a political opponent, and you can also think that that's really a pretext and not the real motivation for impeachment, or that is not, that does not justify wrapping the whole nation into this incredibly divisive and historic process.
Precisely. I mean, I think the premise always has to be that impeachment is the most severe and drastic step that any democracy can take. Every 4 years, we spend billions of dollars. We devote all of our political attention, or most of it, to deciding who should win the presidency. So it's not that it's never the case that we should remove the president through impeachment. Obviously, the Constitution provides for that, but it's certainly the case that it should be done only with the most severe kind of wrongdoing. In the 1990s, Democrats didn't defend Bill Clinton from impeachment on the grounds that he did nothing wrong. Everyone thought he did something wrong. He lied to the country. He lied under oath. The issue was what he had done really didn't rise to the level where doing something as catastrophic or as apocalyptic for democracy as removing the elected president was justified as a result of that wrongdoing. The same is true here. But again, I think that it's really important too to realize that you can impose impeachment or think that it's just a political sideshow or a tactic on the part of Democrats without saying that Trump did nothing wrong. Every president does things wrong. The question is, does it rise to the level that justifies impeachment? I think the other issue, too, is that one of Trump's main points of defense is that it really is true that Ukraine was interfering in the 2016 election, much the way that Russia was, not by siding with the Trump campaign, but by siding with the Clinton campaign, which they thought he would win. And that's the question that Democrats and the whole impeachment process seems really eager to avoid.
Right, and Glenn, that's one thing where you've seen that reported in Politico and the New York Times, and then yet their own reporters have been trying to discredit the original reporting because that reporting does not benefit the current impeachment mechanism. I think some of the viewers may not be as familiar. Could you lay out the facts on that, on the Ukrainian meddling in the 2016 election?
Sure. So as we were just talking, Trump's foreign policy views were ones that he advocated openly during the election. He advocated, for example, that the U.S. had no business trying to engineer regime change in Syria, that we ought to just let Assad rule Syria because it wasn't worth U.S. treasure and U.S. blood to engage in regime change in Syria. And he also advocated that the U.S. has no business trying to provoke a war with Russia or risk a war with Russia or conflict with Russia in order to get involved in Ukraine, that was essentially kind of the Mexico of Russia, in their backyard, but not in the U.S. Is something, again, that President Obama also said when he refused to send lethal arms to Ukraine despite bipartisan pressures. So what happened was when Trump was saying those things, namely that, look, it's not our business to defend Ukraine from Russia, obviously Ukrainian officials were kind of horrified by that. They want the U.S. to defend them against Russian aggression. And so they were openly anti-Trump. They didn't want Trump to win. They wanted the candidate who was going to defend Ukraine to win, which is Hillary Clinton. And there was press accounts in real time, both in the Ukrainian press and the American press, about efforts on the part of the Ukrainian government to help the DNC, to help the Clinton campaign find dirt on Manafort, find dirt on Trump, in order to sabotage the Trump campaign. And then once Trump won, there was a big article in Politico by very respected political reporters explaining that the Ukrainians are now in a difficult position because they sided with Hillary Clinton thinking she was going to win, and cited the DNC agents who were traipsing through Ukraine working with the Ukrainian officials to get dirt on Paul Manafort, and they got that dirt on Paul Manafort.
Right.
So there was all this evidence that the Ukrainians were in fact siding with the Hillary Clinton campaign and collaborating with the Clinton campaign in order to help Clinton win the election and Donald Trump lose the election, and also that Ukraine was a major player behind the narrative that the Trump campaign was colluding with the Russians and helped spawn that investigation. So all of that is not conspiracy thinking. There's actual evidence for it. It was published in Politico and lots of other places. The Ukrainian court found that 2 Ukrainian officials were guilty of conspiring with the Hillary Clinton campaign, although an appellate court overturned it. But there was lots of evidence that actually happened.
Right.
So interesting. Yeah. Glenn, thank you so much.
Thank you, Glenn. Thanks for joining us.
All right, good to be with you guys.
Good to see you. All right, next on Rising, all eyes are going to be on how candidates defend or explain their platforms tonight.
Especially Senator Elizabeth Warren and her Medicare for All plan. The Young Turks' Cenk Uygur tells us what he is watching for tonight. That when Rising continues.